Harrison Bennett's hands trembled as he stared at the security monitor in his home office. The timestamp read 3:47 a.m. On the screen, his new caregiver Imani Washington stood in the nursery with his 3 paralyzed babies. But she wasn't checking diapers or adjusting blankets. She was moving their tiny limbs in patterns he'd never seen before, whispering words he couldn't hear through the audio feed. Her hands glided over their small bodies with practiced precision, bending their legs, rotating their arms, pressing gently on their chests. The babies, who usually lay still as dolls, seemed different somehow. Their faces looked peaceful, almost responsive. Harrison leaned closer to the screen, his heart pounding. What was she doing to his children? Was this some kind of ritual? Some strange practice he should have vetted before hiring her? He'd been so desperate when he brought her into his home. 5 caregivers had quit in 3 months. His mother-in-law had threatened to call child services. His company was falling apart. And then Imani had walked through his door in that bright red dress, smiling at his broken family like they were a gift instead of a burden. Now, watching her through the camera lens, Harrison felt ice run through his veins. He'd installed these cameras everywhere after the 4th nanny quit, claiming the job was too depressing. He needed to know his children were safe. He needed to see everything. And now he was seeing something that made no sense. Imani lifted Lucas, his son, the smallest of the triplets. The baby's head lolled to the side just like it always did. Nothing worked below his neck. The doctors had been clear. The birth complications had damaged all 3 children's spinal cords. They would never walk, never feed themselves, never live normal lives. Yet Imani held Lucas like he was made of hope instead of broken nerves and shattered dreams. Harrison's finger hovered over his phone. Should he call the police? Rush to the nursery? Fire her on the spot? But something stopped him. Maybe it was the exhaustion that had become his constant companion. Maybe it was the way his children's faces looked different on the screen, less vacant. Or maybe it was the memory of how Imani had accepted this impossible job without hesitation, asking for nothing extra, just grateful for the chance to help. 3 months earlier, everything had been different. Harrison remembered the hospital room, the bright lights, the doctor's urgent voices. His wife, Catherine, had been so excited about the triplets. They'd painted the nursery together, bought 3 of everything, laughed about the chaos that was coming. But the delivery went wrong. Terribly wrong. Catherine started bleeding. The doctors rushed her to emergency surgery. When they finally brought the babies out, they were blue and still. Minutes without oxygen. Minutes that stole everything. "Mr. Bennett," the doctor had said, his face grave. "Your wife didn't make it. And the babies? The oxygen deprivation caused significant spinal damage. They're alive but they can't move. We're not sure they ever will." Harrison had stood there, holding 3 newborns who couldn't squeeze his fingers back, processing the fact that his wife was dead and his children would never run or play or live the lives Catherine had dreamed for them. The grief hit him like a wave, drowning him, pulling him under until he couldn't breathe. The first month was a blur. His sister Rachel moved in to help. His mother-in-law, Patricia, came over daily, weeping over the babies and shooting Harrison looks that said this was somehow his fault. The first caregiver lasted 2 weeks before quitting. The second made it 3 days. They all said the same thing. It was too sad, too hard, too much responsibility with no hope of improvement. By month 3, Harrison had retreated into work, letting caregivers handle the daily routines while he buried himself in contracts and meetings. But he couldn't escape the guilt. Couldn't stop wondering if he should have noticed something was wrong with Catherine earlier. Couldn't stop seeing his children lying motionless in their cribs, trapped in bodies that wouldn't obey them. Then the 6th caregiver walked out and his assistant mentioned Imani Washington. "She's young," his assistant had warned. 26. No formal credentials. But she studied pediatric therapy techniques on her own. She grew up helping her grandmother with special needs children. She's looking for a chance to prove herself. Harrison had been too tired to care about credentials. He'd interviewed her in his office, expecting another person who would take one look at his children and run. But Imani had walked in wearing that red dress, bright as a sunrise, and smiled at him with genuine warmth. "Mr. Bennett," she'd said, "I heard about your children. I'd like to help if you'll let me." "They're paralyzed," Harrison had said bluntly. "All 3. They can't do anything. The doctors say they never will. Most people can't handle it." "Most people don't understand that babies are always learning," Imani had replied. "Even if their bodies don't work the way we expect. Your children deserve someone who sees their potential, not their limitations." Harrison had hired her on the spot. Now, watching her through the camera, he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. Have you ever trusted someone with your most precious treasure, only to question if you made the right choice? What would you do if you saw something that didn't make sense? Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts. And if you want to find out what Harrison discovers, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Imani placed Lucas back in his crib and moved to Olivia, his daughter with the dark curls. She repeated the same strange movements, her lips moving in words Harrison couldn't hear. Then Isabel, the third triplet. Each time Imani's hands moved with purpose and gentleness, like she was conducting a symphony only she could hear. Harrison grabbed his robe and headed for the nursery. He needed answers. He needed to know what this woman was doing to his children in the middle of the night. The house was silent as he walked through the halls, his bare feet cold on the marble floors. He'd bought this mansion for Catherine, thinking about the family they'd raise here. Now it felt like a museum of broken dreams. He paused outside the nursery door, listening. Imani's voice drifted through, soft and melodic, singing something he didn't recognize. Not a lullaby. Something older, something that sounded like it came from deep roots and old traditions. Harrison's hand touched the doorknob, but he didn't turn it. Not yet. Instead, he stood there listening to her sing to his children. The babies who couldn't respond, couldn't smile back, couldn't give her any sign that her efforts mattered. Yet she sang like they were the most important audience in the world. Like they deserved every bit of love and attention she could give. Something shifted in Harrison's chest. Some small crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. He turned away from the door and walked back to his office. He would watch. He would wait. He would see what Imani Washington was really doing with his children. And if she was helping them, even in some small way he didn't understand, then maybe he'd been right to trust her. Maybe hope wasn't completely dead after all. Back at his desk, Harrison rewound the security footage to the beginning of Imani's shift. He watched her arrive at the nursery at 8 p.m., greeting each baby by name, telling them about her day as if they could understand. She changed their diapers with gentle efficiency, talking the whole time about the weather, the birds she'd seen, the book she was reading. She fed them through their tubes, explaining what each nutrient was for as if teaching them about their own bodies. Then as the hours passed and the house grew quiet, her routine changed. She began the movements he'd seen on the live feed. Careful rotations of tiny joints. Gentle pressure on small muscles. Patterns that seemed random but clearly weren't. She did this for over an hour, never rushing, never showing frustration when the babies didn't respond. Harrison watched until dawn started to break outside his window. He watched Imani finish her strange therapy session and settle the babies back into their cribs. She stood there for a long moment, looking down at them with an expression of such pure affection that Harrison felt his throat tighten. "You're going to surprise everyone," she whispered to the babies, her voice just barely audible through the audio feed. "I know you are. You just need time and someone who believes in you." She left the nursery as the sun rose, passing by Harrison's office on her way out. He heard her footsteps pause outside his door, then continue down the hallway. A few minutes later, the front door closed softly. Harrison sat back in his chair, exhausted and confused. He had no idea what he'd witnessed. But something in him wanted to believe that Imani Washington knew exactly what she was doing. That maybe, just maybe, she could see something in his children that no one else could. He looked at the family photo on his desk. Catherine smiled back at him, her hand on her pregnant belly, her eyes full of joy and expectation. She'd believed in miracles. She'd believed in love conquering everything. Harrison had lost that faith the day she died. But watching Imani care for his children with such dedication and hope, he felt something long dormant stir inside him. Not quite faith. Not yet. But perhaps the smallest seed of possibility. He would watch. He would wait. And he would see what happened next. Harrison's alarm went off at 6 a.m., but he'd never gone to bed. He stood in his kitchen, staring at the coffee maker, trying to remember how to function on no sleep. This had become normal over the past 3 months. Sleep felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Catherine's face, heard the doctor's grim diagnosis, felt the weight of 3 helpless babies depending on him. His phone buzzed. Another message from Patricia, his mother-in-law. She sent them constantly now, always with the same theme. He wasn't doing enough, the babies needed better care, Catherine would be disappointed in him. Harrison deleted it without reading past the first line. He couldn't deal with her judgment today. He could barely deal with his own. The house felt too big and too empty. Catherine had loved this place, had spent months decorating each room with care and excitement. Now Harrison walked through it like a ghost, avoiding the nursery Catherine had designed with its cheerful yellow walls and animal murals. He'd had it repainted gray after the babies came home. The yellow felt like a lie. His children would never play in that room the way Catherine had imagined. Mr. Bennett? Harrison turned to find Rachel, his younger sister, standing in the kitchen doorway. She'd been staying in the guest house since the delivery, helping where she could. She looked tired too. Everyone in this house looked tired. Did you sleep at all? Rachel asked, pouring herself coffee. Some, Harrison lied. I was working. Harrison, you can't keep doing this. You're going to collapse. The company can survive without you for a while. Your children need you present, not just physically here but actually here. I am here, Harrison said, his voice sharper than intended. I'm doing everything I can. Rachel gave him a look that said she didn't believe him. The new caregiver starts today, right? Imani? She started last night, Harrison corrected. I wanted her to get used to the night routine. And how did it go? Harrison thought about what he'd seen on the monitors. I'm not sure yet. Rachel studied him carefully. You set up more cameras, didn't you? I need to know they're safe. You need to trust someone eventually, Rachel said gently. You can't watch them every second of every day. You'll lose your mind. I already lost everything that mattered, Harrison muttered. Rachel set down her coffee and pulled him into a hug. Harrison stood stiffly in her embrace, fighting the urge to pull away. He didn't deserve comfort. Didn't deserve sympathy. His wife was dead. His children were broken. And it was his job to somehow keep everyone going despite the impossibility of it all. Catherine wouldn't want you to drown in guilt, Rachel whispered. She'd want you to love those babies. Really love them. Not just provide for them. Harrison pulled back. I do love them. Do you? Or do you see them as reminders of what you lost? The question hit harder than any of Patricia's accusations. Harrison turned away, unable to answer. Because Rachel was right. Every time he looked at Olivia, Isabel and Lucas, he saw Catherine's death. Saw the life they should have had vanishing like smoke. How could he bond with children who represented such profound loss? His phone rang. Work. Always work. Harrison grabbed it gratefully, escaping into conference calls and contracts, into problems he could actually solve. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. Imani came every evening at 8 and left at dawn. Harrison watched her on the monitors, studying her unusual methods, looking for any sign of harm or incompetence. He found neither. The babies seemed calm under her care. They didn't cry as much. Their sleep patterns improved. But they still didn't move. Still didn't respond. Still lay in their cribs like beautiful, broken dolls. Harrison's mother-in-law visited on a Tuesday, sweeping into the house with her usual air of judgment and grief. Patricia looked at the babies with tears streaming down her face, then turned her anger on Harrison. They should be in a facility, she said. Somewhere with real medical professionals. Not some random girl you hired off the street. Imani has training, Harrison replied, keeping his voice level. And they're better here. This is their home. Their home. Patricia's laugh was bitter. This is a tomb. You've turned it into a gray, joyless tomb. Catherine made that nursery beautiful, and you painted over it like you were erasing her memory. I'm doing the best I can, Harrison said through gritted teeth. Your best isn't good enough. My daughter died bringing these babies into the world and you can't even look at them without flinching. I see it, Harrison. You can barely stand to be in the same room with them. The accusation hung in the air, true and cutting. Harrison had no defense. Patricia was right. He avoided the nursery. Avoided holding his children. Avoided everything that made the pain real and immediate. If you won't care for them properly, Patricia continued, then I'll petition for custody. They deserve better than this. She left before Harrison could respond. He stood in the empty hallway, her threat ringing in his ears. Could she actually take his children? Did he even have the right to keep them when he could barely function as their father? That night, Harrison sat in his office with a glass of whiskey he wouldn't drink, staring at the security monitors. Imani arrived right at 8, wearing a bright green dress this time. She seemed to own nothing but colorful clothes, each one a rebellion against the gray world Harrison had created. She went straight to the nursery, greeting the babies with her usual warmth. Hello, my sweet ones. Did you have a good day? I bet you did. I bet you've been growing stronger even if no one else can see it yet. Harrison watched her lift Olivia, cradling his daughter against her chest. Olivia's head lolled limply, but Imani didn't seem discouraged. She held the baby close, swaying gently, humming a melody that drifted through the audio feed. Your daddy is scared, Imani told Olivia softly. He doesn't know how to love you without hurting. But he will. I know he will. Because you're impossible not to love. Harrison's hand tightened around his glass. How dare this stranger presume to understand his feelings? How dare she act like love was simple when everything in his life had shattered? But even as anger flared, he couldn't look away from the screen. Couldn't stop watching Imani care for his children with a gentleness and dedication he couldn't seem to muster himself. She spent an hour with each baby, talking, singing, moving their limbs in those strange patterns he still didn't understand. Then she settled them for the night, making sure each one was comfortable and secure. At midnight, Harrison's assistant called with an emergency from work. A deal falling apart. A client threatening to walk. The kind of crisis that would have consumed him completely a year ago. Now Harrison felt nothing but numbness as he listened to the problem and provided a solution. Work didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered. He hung up and stared at the monitors. Imani was reading in the rocking chair Catherine had picked out, close enough to hear if any of the babies needed her. She looked content. Peaceful. Like caring for 3 paralyzed infants was exactly where she wanted to be. Harrison couldn't understand it. Couldn't understand why anyone would choose this heartbreak voluntarily. At 3 a.m., when Imani began her unusual therapy routine, Harrison finally left his office and walked to the nursery. He stood outside the door, listening to her soft voice counting in patterns, explaining what she was doing to babies who couldn't possibly comprehend. "We're waking up your muscles," she murmured. "Reminding your body how to listen to your brain. It takes time, but time is something we have plenty of. No rushing. No pressure. Just gentle work every single day." Harrison pushed the door open. Imani looked up, startled but not guilty. She smiled at him, that same warm smile she'd given him at the interview. "Mr. Bennett," she said quietly. "Did we wake you?" "I don't sleep much," Harrison admitted, stepping into the nursery. "What are you doing?" "Physical therapy," Imani answered simply. "Movement patterns to stimulate neural pathways. My grandmother taught me. She worked with children like yours for 40 years. The doctors said therapy wouldn't help," Harrison said, hearing the defeat in his own voice. "The doctors don't know everything," Imani replied, no challenge in her tone, just gentle certainty. "Your babies are 3 months old. Their brains are still developing. Their bodies are still learning. I can't promise miracles, but I can promise I'll never stop trying." Harrison looked at his children. Really looked at them, maybe for the first time since bringing them home. Olivia with Catherine's nose. Isabel with his own dark eyes. Lucas with the tiny dimple in his chin that matched Harrison's father. They were people. Small, vulnerable people who deserved more than his grief and avoidance. "Can you teach me?" The words came out before Harrison could stop them. "The therapy?" Imani's face lit up with genuine joy. "Of course. I'd love to teach you." Harrison sat down next to her, and for the first time in 3 months, he held his son without feeling like he was drowning. Imani guided his hands, showing him the gentle movements, explaining the purpose of each one. Lucas lay quiet in his arms, his small face peaceful. "He knows you're his father," Imani said softly. "He feels your love even when you can't express it." Harrison wasn't sure he believed that. But sitting there in the quiet nursery with this woman who refused to give up hope, he felt something shift inside him. Not healing. Not yet. But maybe the very beginning of it. The smallest crack letting light into his darkness. When dawn came and Imani prepared to leave, Harrison walked her to the door. "Thank you," he said, the words inadequate but sincere. "For what?" Imani asked. "For not quitting. For believing in them when I can't." Imani squeezed his hand briefly. "You can believe, Mr. Bennett. You just have to give yourself permission." She left, and Harrison stood in the doorway watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Colors he hadn't noticed in months. Colors that reminded him life continued even when it felt impossible. He went back to the nursery where his children slept. He pulled a chair close to their cribs and sat down to watch them, really watch them, not through a camera lens but with his own eyes in the same room. They breathed steadily, their small chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. They were alive. They were his. And maybe, just maybe, they deserved a father who did more than survive. Harrison reached out and touched Olivia's tiny hand. Her fingers were soft and warm. She didn't grasp back, couldn't grasp back, but that was okay. He would hold on enough for both of them. For the first time since Catherine died, Harrison felt something other than crushing despair. It wasn't hope, not quite. But it was possibility. And possibility was a start. 3 days after his late-night conversation with Imani, Harrison made a decision. He cleared his schedule, told his assistant to handle everything that wasn't absolutely critical, and prepared to be present. Really present. Not watching through screens but actually participating in his children's lives. Rachel was shocked when he told her. "You're taking time off?" she asked, eyebrows raised. "Actual time off?" "The company can survive without me for a while," Harrison said, echoing her earlier words back to her. "My children need me here." Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. "Catherine would be so proud of you." The mention of his wife still hurt, a sharp pain in his chest that never quite faded. But Harrison was learning to breathe through it, to let the grief exist without letting it consume him completely. That evening, when Imani arrived in a bright blue dress, Harrison met her at the door instead of retreating to his office. "Mr. Bennett," she said, surprised but pleased. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine," Harrison assured her. "I was hoping I could join you tonight. Learn more about what you're doing with the babies." Imani's smile could have lit the whole house. "I would love that." They went to the nursery together. Harrison had spent the afternoon in there, sitting with his children, talking to them awkwardly at first but with growing ease. He told them about their mother, about how much Catherine had wanted them, how excited she'd been. He told them about his own childhood, his parents, the lake house where he'd spent summers as a boy. He talked until his voice grew hoarse, and the babies had listened in their silent way, and Harrison had felt a connection he'd been too afraid to seek before. Now, with Imani there, he watched her begin the evening routine. She checked each baby carefully, not just for obvious needs but for subtle signs of discomfort or distress. She adjusted Isabel's position slightly, noting that the baby seemed to prefer lying with her head turned to the left. She hummed while changing Lucas's diaper, telling him about the flowers she'd seen blooming in the garden. She held Olivia close and described the sunset, painting pictures with words for a child who couldn't see the window from her crib. "You treat them like they understand everything," Harrison observed. "Because they do," Imani replied simply. "Maybe not the exact words but the intent behind them. Babies know when they're loved, when they matter. Your children have been through so much already. They deserve to know they're valued." Harrison thought about the months he'd spent avoiding them, treating their care as a task to be managed rather than a relationship to be built. Shame washed over him, but Imani seemed to sense his thoughts. "You're here now," she said gently. "That's what matters. Not yesterday or last month. Right now." She showed him how to do the feeding tubes properly, how to position each baby to prevent discomfort. Then came the physical therapy. Imani was patient and thorough, demonstrating each movement multiple times until Harrison felt confident enough to try himself. "Like this?" he asked, carefully rotating Lucas's tiny ankle. "Perfect," Imani encouraged. "You're a natural." Harrison doubted that, but he appreciated her kindness. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the baby's quiet breathing and the soft music Imani played from her phone. It was peaceful in a way Harrison hadn't experienced since before Catherine got pregnant. Not the peace of numbness but the peace of purpose. "Can I ask you something?" Harrison said after a while. "Of course. Why did you take this job?" "Most people run from situations like this. They can't handle the sadness, the lack of progress. But you walked in like it was exactly what you wanted." Imani was quiet for a moment, her hands gentle on Isabel's legs. "I had a younger brother," she finally said. "His name was Jordan. He was born with a degenerative muscle disease. Doctors said he wouldn't live past 5 years old. Everyone looked at him and saw tragedy. But my grandmother, she saw a child who deserved love and joy for however long he had." "What happened to him?" Harrison asked softly. "He lived until he was 12, Imani said, her voice full of love and sorrow. 7 years longer than anyone predicted. And those years were beautiful. Hard but beautiful. My grandmother taught me that every life has value, regardless of how it looks from the outside. She taught me these therapy techniques. Old methods passed down through generations. Not all of them work, but some do. And even when they don't, the time spent in loving care is never wasted." Harrison felt his throat tighten. "I'm sorry you lost your brother." "I'm grateful I had him," Imani corrected gently. "And I'm grateful for the skills my grandmother gave me. I believe I was meant to use them to help others. When your assistant reached out, I knew this was where I needed to be." They continued working, and Harrison found himself watching Imani as much as he watched his children. She moved with such confidence and grace, turning what could have been a clinical task into something that felt almost sacred. She sang softly while she worked, melodies Harrison didn't recognize but found soothing. "What are you singing?" he asked. "Old songs," Imani replied. "My grandmother used to sing them. She said music helps the body remember how to move, how to feel, how to heal." "Do you really think they can heal?" The doctors were pretty definitive. Imani met his eyes steadily. "I think doctors know a lot but they don't know everything. I think the human body is capable of surprising things when given the right support. I think your children deserve the chance to surprise everyone. Harrison wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that hope wasn't just wishful thinking. But 3 months of disappointment had taught him to guard his expectations. As if reading his mind, Imani added, "You don't have to believe yet, Mr. Bennett. I'll believe enough for both of us until you're ready." Something in her absolute certainty touched Harrison deeply. This young woman who had no reason to invest herself so completely in his family's tragedy was offering him the gift of her faith. The least he could do was try to accept it. "Thank you," he said. "And please call me Harrison." Imani smiled. Harrison then. They worked late into the night. Harrison learned the patterns of movement, the pressure points that might stimulate neural responses, the stretches that kept muscles from atrophying. He learned how to read his children's subtle cues, how to tell when they were uncomfortable or content. He learned that Isabel responded to touch on her left side more than her right, that Lucas seemed to relax when he heard Imani's voice, that Olivia's breathing changed when someone sang to her. At 2 a.m., Rachel knocked softly on the nursery door. "I'm heading to bed," she said, then stopped when she saw Harrison sitting on the floor with Lucas in his arms while Imani worked with the girls. "Oh, this is new." "This is good," Harrison corrected. Rachel's eyes filled with tears again, but this time she let them fall. "Yes, this is very good. Good night." After she left, Imani glanced at Harrison. "Your sister loves you very much." "She's been my rock through all of this," Harrison admitted. "I don't know what I would have done without her." "You have good people around you," Imani observed. "That's important. Nobody can survive tragedy alone." "I've been trying to," Harrison said quietly. "I thought it was my burden to carry. My fault to bear." "Catherine's death wasn't your fault," Imani said firmly. "Birth complications happen. Tragic, unfair things happen. But punishing yourself doesn't honor her memory. Living fully, loving your children completely, that's how you honor her." Harrison blinked back unexpected tears. "You didn't even know her." "I know she loved you. I know she wanted these babies. I know she'd want you to be happy again eventually. That's not betraying her. That's celebrating the life and love you shared." Harrison had to look away, overwhelmed by emotions he'd been suppressing for months. Grief, yes, but also gratitude. Gratitude that this stranger had walked into his life and refused to let him drown in despair. Gratitude that someone believed his children deserved more than pity. Gratitude that he wasn't alone in this anymore. They finished the therapy session in comfortable silence. When all 3 babies were settled and sleeping peacefully, Imani gathered her things to leave. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. "Same time," Harrison confirmed. "And Imani? I'm glad you're here." Her smile was radiant. "So am I, Harrison. So am I." After she left, Harrison didn't retreat to his office. Instead, he pulled the rocking chair close to the cribs and sat down to watch his children sleep. Their faces were peaceful, innocent, beautiful. They looked like Catherine. They looked like hope. Harrison didn't know if they would ever walk or talk or live independent lives. The doctor's predictions weighed heavily on him. But for the first time since their birth, he thought maybe those predictions didn't have to define their entire future. Maybe there was room for something unexpected. Something better. He thought about Imani's brother, about those 7 extra years that defied medical expectations. He thought about his grandmother's old techniques, passed down through generations. He thought about the way his children seemed calmer, more at peace since Imani started caring for them. Maybe miracles didn't look the way people expected. Maybe miracles were small and quiet, happening in the everyday moments of love and dedication. Maybe miracles were beautiful young women in bright dresses who refused to accept that some lives were beyond help. Harrison reached out and touched each of his children, one gentle hand on each crib. "I'm here now," he whispered to them. "I'm sorry it took me so long. But I'm here and I'm not leaving. We're going to get through this together." The babies slept on, unaware of their father's promise. But Harrison felt the words settle into his heart like a vow. He would be present. He would learn. He would love these children the way they deserved to be loved. And maybe, just maybe, something beautiful would come from all this pain. Dawn was breaking when Harrison finally left the nursery. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, colors that reminded him of hope and new beginnings. He stood at the window watching the light spread across his property, feeling something shift inside him. Life wasn't over. It was different than he'd planned, harder than he'd imagined, but it wasn't over. Catherine would want him to keep going. She'd want their children to have a father who showed up, who tried, who didn't let grief steal his capacity for joy. Harrison made coffee and sat at the kitchen table thinking about the day ahead. He had calls to make, work to delegate, a schedule to rearrange so he could spend more time in the nursery. He had a mother-in-law to call and reassure, a sister to thank properly, a life to rebuild around his new reality. But mostly he had 3 children who needed him, who deserved his best effort, his fullest presence, his unconditional love. And with Imani's help, he was finally ready to give them that. The sun rose fully, flooding the kitchen with light. Harrison lifted his coffee cup in a silent toast to Catherine, to their children, to second chances and unexpected grace. Then he finished his coffee and went upstairs to shower and prepare for the day. A new day. A better day. A day of showing up and trying and maybe, eventually, healing. 2 weeks passed in a rhythm Harrison had never expected to find comforting. Every evening at 8, Imani arrived in another bright dress, yellow or orange or purple, each one a splash of color against the gray world Harrison had created. Every evening he met her at the door and they went together to the nursery, where they spent hours caring for his children with growing confidence and connection. Harrison's company survived his reduced involvement. His assistant handled most issues, escalating only what truly needed his attention. Patricia still called regularly with complaints and concerns, but Harrison had learned to deflect her criticism with calm assurance. Rachel watched the transformation in her brother with barely concealed relief, often joining them in the nursery to help or simply to observe. The babies remained paralyzed. That fact hadn't changed. But other things had. They seemed more alert, more present. Their eyes tracked movement better. They made small sounds, gurgles and coos that might have been coincidence but felt like communication. Harrison had stopped expecting dramatic improvements and instead learned to appreciate tiny shifts, subtle changes that might mean something or might mean nothing. Imani never lost faith. She worked with the same dedication every night, talking to the babies constantly, moving their limbs through those specific patterns, singing her grandmother's old songs. Harrison watched and learned, memorizing the techniques, practicing during the day when Imani wasn't there. One evening, as they were finishing the feeding routine, Harrison asked the question that had been building in his mind for days. Why do you do the movements in that exact pattern? Is there science behind it? Imani smiled. Some science, yes. Neural pathway stimulation, muscle memory activation, proprioceptive input. But also intuition. My grandmother believed the body has wisdom doctors don't always recognize. She taught me to listen to what each child needs rather than following a rigid protocol. So you're making it up as you go? Harrison asked, trying to keep judgment out of his voice. I'm adapting, Imani corrected gently. Each baby is different. Lucas responds better to firm pressure. Isabel likes gentle stroking. Olivia seems to relax when I work in clockwise patterns. I adjust to what they're telling me. They're not telling you anything, Harrison said, reality crashing back. They can't communicate. They communicate constantly, Imani disagreed. Not with words but with breathing changes, muscle tension, facial expressions. You just have to pay attention. Harrison wanted to argue but stopped himself. He'd seen Imani work enough to know she wasn't imagining things. She did adjust her approach for each child. She did seem to read their needs before they became obvious. Whether that was skill or intuition or something else entirely, it clearly worked. The babies were calmer under her care than they'd ever been with previous caregivers. That night, Rachel joined them in the nursery around 10. She'd been out with friends, something Harrison had encouraged despite her reluctance to leave him alone. She needed a life beyond his tragedy. They all did. How are my favorite nieces and nephew? Rachel asked, bending over the cribs to smile at each baby. Growing stronger every day, Imani said with her usual optimism. Rachel shot Harrison a look that clearly said, Is she serious? Harrison shrugged, unsure himself what to make of Imani's unwavering belief in progress invisible to everyone else. Can I help? Rachel asked. Of course, Imani said warmly. Come sit with me. I'll show you what we do. For the next hour, the 3 of them worked together. Rachel was gentle and attentive, following Imani's instructions carefully. Harrison found himself relaxing into the routine, the quiet conversation and focused activity creating a sense of peace he hadn't felt in months. This is nice, Rachel said softly. Us all here together. Catherine would have loved this. The mention of his wife still hurt, but the pain was softer now, more bearable. She would have, Harrison agreed. She was so excited about having help. She used to joke about needing a whole team of people to manage triplets. She would have loved Imani, Rachel added, smiling at the young woman who was so carefully moving Isabel's legs. She had a gift for finding people with good hearts. Imani blushed slightly. That's very kind of you to say. It's true, Rachel insisted. Most people would have quit by now. The lack of progress would have discouraged them. But you just keep showing up, keep believing. That takes a special kind of strength. These babies are worth it, Imani said simply. Every child is worth patience and dedication, but especially children facing challenges. They deserve people who won't give up on them. Harrison felt something shift in his chest, some old resistance finally crumbling. Imani was right. His children deserved commitment, deserved people who saw their value beyond their limitations. He'd spent months seeing them as broken. But sitting here now, watching them in their cribs, he started to see them differently. Not as tragedies but as his children. Different than expected, yes, but still his. Still precious. Still worth every effort. Around midnight, Rachel headed to bed, hugging both Harrison and Imani before she left. You two are doing something beautiful here, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Don't ever doubt that. After she was gone, Harrison and Imani continued working in comfortable silence. The house was quiet, the only sounds the soft music playing from Imani's phone and the occasional rustle of blankets as they repositioned the babies. Can I ask you something personal? Imani said after a while. Sure. What was Catherine like? You don't talk about her much. Harrison paused, Lucas in his arms, unsure how to compress his wife into words. She was light. That's the best way I can describe her. She made everything brighter just by being in the room. She was funny and kind and believed the best about everyone. She loved me when I was too serious, too focused on work. She taught me how to relax, how to enjoy life instead of just accomplishing things. She sounds wonderful, Imani said softly. She was. And losing her, it felt like the light went out. Like the world lost its color. Harrison looked around the gray nursery, seeing it with fresh eyes. I painted over her choices because I couldn't stand the reminder of what I'd lost. But that was wrong. She put love into this room. She deserves to be remembered here. Imani met his eyes, understanding in her gaze. It's not too late to honor her memory properly. Harrison nodded slowly. Tomorrow I'll call painters. We'll restore the nursery the way Catherine designed it. Yellow walls. Animal murals. Color everywhere. The babies deserve to be surrounded by the love she put into preparing for them. That's beautiful, Imani said, her smile radiant. They finished the therapy session and settled the babies for the night. As Imani gathered her things to leave, Harrison walked her to the door as had become their routine. Thank you, he said, words that seemed inadequate but sincere. For everything. For believing in them. For not giving up. For helping me find my way back to being their father. You were always their father, Imani replied gently. You just needed time to grieve and heal. There's no shame in that. She left, and Harrison stood in the doorway watching her car disappear down the driveway. Then he went back inside to his office, but instead of opening his laptop, he pulled out the photo albums Catherine had started before she got pregnant. Pictures of them traveling, celebrating, building a life together. Pictures of her laughing, her face bright with joy. Pictures of happiness that felt both close and impossibly distant. Harrison let himself remember. Not the death, not the loss, but the life they'd shared. The good years, the love that had been real and sustaining. He let himself miss her without drowning in the grief. Let himself honor her memory without being destroyed by it. When he finally went to bed, he slept better than he had in months. No nightmares. No jolting awake in panic. Just deep, restful sleep with dreams of Catherine smiling at him, telling him he was doing well, that she was proud of him, that their children were lucky to have him. The next morning, Harrison contacted painters and restoration specialists. By afternoon, they were in the nursery removing the gray paint, preparing to restore Catherine's original design. Rachel cried when she saw what he was doing. Patricia, when she heard, actually called to thank him instead of criticize. Catherine would be so happy, Patricia said, her voice breaking. She spent weeks planning that nursery. She had such vision for it. I know, Harrison said. And I'm sorry I covered it up. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were grieving, Patricia replied, softer than she'd been in months. We all were. But this is how we honor her. By creating beauty for her children. It took 3 days to fully restore the nursery. Yellow walls bright as sunshine. Animal murals painted by an artist Catherine had commissioned before her death. Mobile hangings with colorful shapes. A rocking chair reupholstered in cheerful fabric. Curtains that filtered light into warm patterns on the floor. When it was finished, Harrison stood in the doorway, tears streaming down his face. It looked exactly as Catherine had envisioned. Hopeful and joyful and full of love. That evening, when Imani arrived in her bright red dress, Harrison led her to the nursery with a sense of anticipation. She stepped inside and gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Harrison," she breathed. "It's beautiful. It's perfect. Catherine designed it," Harrison said. "She wanted our children surrounded by color and life. I was wrong to erase that. Wrong to let my grief steal their chance to be in the space she created for them." Imani walked around the room, taking in every detail. The babies, moved back in that afternoon, looked somehow more at home in this bright space. More like they belonged. More like children instead of patients. "She had excellent taste," Imani said, her voice full of warmth. "And you honored her beautifully by bringing her vision to life again." They began their evening routine in this transformed space, and Harrison felt lighter than he had since before Catherine died. The nursery felt alive again. Felt like a place where good things could happen. Felt like hope. As they worked, Harrison noticed something. Maybe it was wishful thinking, maybe it was the effect of the brighter environment, but the babies seemed more responsive. Olivia's eyes followed the mobile above her crib. Lucas made soft sounds that might have been contentment. Isabel's breathing changed when Imani sang, like she was listening. "Do you see it?" Imani asked quietly. "I think so," Harrison admitted. "Or maybe I'm just wanting to see it." "Trust yourself," Imani encouraged. "Trust your instincts as a father. You know your children better than you think you do." Harrison wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that the small changes he thought he saw were real and not just desperate imagination. But hope was still a fragile thing, easily crushed by reality's weight. Still, sitting there in Catherine's bright, beautiful nursery with his 3 children and this remarkable young woman who refused to accept defeat, Harrison felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt like maybe, possibly, things could get better. Not perfect. Not the life he'd planned. But better than he'd feared. And better was enough. For now, better was more than enough. 3 weeks into Imani's care, on a Tuesday night at precisely 11:43 p.m., something happened that Harrison would never forget. He was sitting on the floor with Lucas in his lap, gently moving his son's arms in the patterns Imani had taught him. Imani was working with the girls, her voice soft as she sang one of her grandmother's songs. Rachel had gone to bed an hour ago. The house was quiet and peaceful. Harrison shifted Lucas slightly, adjusting his position to better support the baby's head. As he did, he felt it. The smallest flutter against his palm. A movement that didn't come from him. Harrison froze. His heart stopped. His breath caught. Lucas's finger had moved. Just the tiniest twitch, barely perceptible, but Harrison had felt it. Definite and real. "Imani," he whispered, afraid to speak too loudly, afraid to break whatever magic had just happened. "Imani, I felt something." Imani looked up immediately, reading the shock in his face. She set Isabel down carefully and came to kneel beside Harrison. "What did you feel?" His finger moved. Just a little, but it moved. "Show me exactly what you were doing," Imani instructed, her voice calm but intent. Harrison repeated the motion, gently pressing on Lucas's palm while rotating his tiny wrist. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. Disappointment started to creep in. Maybe he'd imagined it. Maybe it was just wishful thinking. "One more time," Imani encouraged. "Babies learn through repetition." Harrison tried again, his hands shaking slightly. And there it was. Lucas's index finger curled, just barely but undeniably on purpose. A movement that came from him, not from external manipulation. Harrison made a sound between a laugh and a sob. He moved. He actually moved. Imani's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was triumphant. "I knew it. I knew they could do it. Their bodies just needed time to remember how." "But the doctors said," Harrison started. "The doctors were wrong," Imani said firmly but gently. "Not about everything. The spinal damage is real. But they underestimated these babies' capacity to adapt. The brain can find new pathways. Bodies can heal in unexpected ways. Your son just proved that." Harrison looked down at Lucas, this tiny human who had just accomplished something the medical establishment said was impossible. Lucas's face was peaceful, unaware that he'd just changed everything. Unaware that he'd just given his father the first real hope since the day he was born. "Should we call the doctor?" Harrison asked, his mind racing. "In the morning," Imani said. "Right now, let's just celebrate this moment. Let's acknowledge what Lucas just did without immediately handing it over to skeptics who will try to explain it away as a reflex." Harrison nodded, understanding her caution. He'd read enough medical reports, heard enough grim predictions. He knew doctors would want to observe, to test, to potentially dismiss this tiny miracle as something less significant than it felt. But sitting there with his son, having felt that small but definite movement, Harrison knew it was real. Knew it meant something. Knew it changed everything. They continued the therapy session with renewed focus. Harrison worked with Lucas, repeating the sequence that had triggered the movement, hoping for more. Imani worked with the girls, her techniques careful and patient as always. The nursery felt charged with new possibility, new hope. An hour later, Lucas moved his finger again. Then again. By the time Imani prepared to leave at dawn, Lucas had demonstrated intentional finger movement 5 times. Not much, not enough to change his daily care needs, but enough to prove his brain and body were capable of more than anyone had predicted. Harrison walked Imani to the door, his steps lighter than they'd been in months. "Thank you," he said, the words carrying weight beyond gratitude. "Thank you for believing when I couldn't. For seeing potential where I saw only tragedy." Imani squeezed his hand. "This is just the beginning, Harrison. Trust me. This is just the beginning." After she left, Harrison stood in the hallway, processing what had happened. He thought about calling Rachel, waking her up to share the news. He thought about calling Patricia, about sending messages to everyone who doubted and despaired. But instead, he went back to the nursery and sat with his children, watching them sleep, letting joy and hope wash over him in quiet waves. Lucas had moved. His son had moved. It was small, yes. It might not lead to anything more, yes. But it was something. It was proof that the impossible wasn't quite as impossible as everyone had claimed. Harrison reached out and touched each of his children, his heart full of emotion he couldn't name. Love, yes. But also wonder. Gratitude. Hope. So much hope. When Rachel came downstairs at 7, she found Harrison still in the nursery, sitting on the floor, staring at Lucas with an expression she hadn't seen on his face in months. "Harrison? What's wrong? You look..." Lucas moved, Harrison interrupted, his voice breaking. "His finger. He moved it on purpose. Multiple times. Imani and I both saw it." Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. She sank onto the floor next to her brother, staring at her tiny nephew. "Are you sure? It wasn't just a spasm or reflex." "I'm sure," Harrison said. "It was deliberate. It happened when we were doing specific therapy movements. It was real, Rachel." Rachel started crying, happy tears that she didn't bother to hide. "I can't believe it. The doctors were so certain. They said it would never happen." "The doctors were wrong," Harrison said, feeling strength in those words. "Imani was right. The babies just needed time and the right kind of care." Rachel pulled her brother into a hug, both of them crying now, releasing months of grief and fear and hopelessness. Lucas slept on, unaware that he'd just given his family something precious. Something they'd thought was lost forever. Hope. The real kind. The kind based on evidence, not just wishful thinking. Harrison spent the day watching Lucas obsessively, looking for more movement. He called his pediatrician and scheduled an emergency appointment for the next day. He called Patricia and told her the news, her screams of joy loud enough to hurt his ear. He called his assistant and pushed all his meetings back another week. Nothing mattered more than this. If you've made it this far, you're probably wondering what happens next. Will the other babies show improvement too? Will the doctors believe what Harrison saw? Subscribe now so you don't miss a single moment of this incredible journey. And drop a comment telling me what you think. Do you believe in miracles? That evening, Imani arrived to find Harrison practically bouncing with energy. Before she could even set down her bag, he started talking. "I've been watching him all day. He did it 3 more times. 3. The doctor's appointment is tomorrow morning. Rachel wants to come. My mother-in-law wants to come. Everyone wants to witness it." Imani smiled, her calm a counterpoint to his excitement. "That's wonderful. But Harrison, I need you to prepare yourself. The doctors might not react the way you hope. They might minimize it or attribute it to reflexes. They might not see it as the breakthrough we know it is. But you'll be there, right?" Harrison asked, suddenly needing her assurance. "You'll explain your methods, show them what we've been doing?" "If you want me there, I'll be there," Imani promised. The next morning, Harrison's pediatrician's office was crowded. Harrison, Rachel, Patricia, and Imani all gathered in the examination room with Lucas. The doctor, an older man named Dr. Graham who'd been managing the triplets' care since birth, looked skeptical from the moment Harrison started explaining. "Finger movement," Dr. Graham repeated, his tone carefully neutral. "And you believe this is intentional?" "I know it is," Harrison said firmly. "I've seen it multiple times. It happens when we do specific physical therapy movements." Dr. Graham examined Lucas carefully, testing reflexes, checking muscle tone. Mr. Bennett, I need to be honest with you. What you're describing sounds like a reflex response. The spinal damage your son sustained was severe. Intentional movement below the injury site is highly unlikely. But possible, Imani interjected quietly. Not impossible. Just unlikely. And I've seen unlikely things happen before. Dr. Graham turned his attention to Imani for the first time. You're the caregiver? Do you have medical training? I have practical training, Imani replied evenly. My grandmother worked with special needs children for 40 years. She taught me techniques that aren't typically used in modern medicine but have proven effective in certain cases. Alternative medicine, Dr. Graham said, and the dismissal in his voice was clear. Mr. Bennett, I understand your desire for hope. But I have to advise caution. False hope can be more damaging than accepting reality. Show him Imani, Harrison said, ignoring the doctor's condescension. Show him what we do. Imani took Lucas from Harrison and began the therapy sequence. She moved with practiced confidence, her hands gentle but firm, talking to Lucas the whole time, explaining each movement. The room fell silent as everyone watched. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Nothing happened. Harrison felt panic rising. What if it didn't work with an audience? What if Lucas decided right now to stop showing progress? Sometimes it takes time, Imani said calmly. Bodies don't perform on command. But I promise you, Dr. Graham, this baby has intentional movement capacity. I'm sure you believe that, Dr. Graham said not unkindly. And your dedication is admirable. But I think we need to be realistic about what we're seeing here. Look, Patricia suddenly exclaimed, pointing at Lucas. Look at his hand. Everyone's eyes snapped to Lucas. His tiny index finger was curling, slowly but distinctly, responding to Imani's pressure on his palm. The room erupted. Rachel grabbed Harrison's arm. Patricia started crying. Harrison felt vindication wash over him like a wave. Dr. Graham leaned in closer, his professional skepticism wavering. Do that again, he instructed Imani. She repeated the sequence. Lucas's finger moved again. And again. Again the movement came. Small but undeniable. Dr. Graham sat back, his expression shifting from skepticism to careful consideration. That's unexpected. I can't explain that based on his injury. The neural pathway shouldn't exist. But it does, Imani said simply. The brain is capable of remarkable adaptation, especially in infants. Lucas is finding new ways to communicate with his body. Dr. Graham was quiet for a long moment. Finally he said, I'd like to run some tests. Neural scans, response mapping. If what you're saying is true, this could have significant implications for how we understand infant neurology. Run whatever tests you need, Harrison said. But we're continuing the therapy. Imani knows what she's doing. Dr. Graham nodded slowly. I can see that. Miss Washington, I'd like to learn more about your techniques. Would you be willing to document your methods? Of course, Imani agreed. I want to help any way I can. They scheduled follow-up appointments and tests. As they left the office, Harrison felt like he was walking on air. Dr. Graham had believed them. More than that, he wanted to understand how this was happening. The skepticism had turned to scientific curiosity. In the parking lot, Patricia hugged Imani tightly. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you for not giving up on my grandchildren. For seeing what no one else could see. They made it easy, Imani replied warmly. They're fighters, all three of them. Harrison drove home with Lucas secured in his car seat, Rachel and Imani following in another car. His mind raced with possibilities. If Lucas could move his finger, what else might be possible? Could he eventually gain more motor control? Could the girls show similar progress? For the first time since Catherine died, Harrison let himself imagine a future different from the bleak picture the doctors had painted. Maybe his children wouldn't walk or run or live completely independent lives. But maybe they could have more than anyone had predicted. Maybe they could surprise everyone. That evening in the nursery, as they went through their usual routine, Harrison watched Imani work with Isabel and Olivia with renewed focus. Looking for signs, however small, of progress. And he found them. Tiny things he'd been too discouraged to notice before. The way Isabel's eyes tracked movement. The way Olivia's breathing changed when spoken to directly. The way both girls seemed more present, more aware than they had been weeks ago. Do you see it? Imani asked, echoing his thoughts. Do you see how much they're growing? I see it, Harrison confirmed. I see everything now. They worked late into the night, hope fueling their efforts. The nursery, with its bright yellow walls and colorful murals, Felt like the perfect environment for small miracles. Felt like a place where impossible things could happen. When Imani finally prepared to leave at dawn, Harrison walked her to the door as always. But this time, before she could leave, he caught her hand. "I don't know how to thank you properly," he said. "You've given me back my children. Given me back hope. Given me back myself." Imani smiled, her face radiant in the early morning light. "You did that yourself, Harrison. You chose to be present. To try. To believe. I just showed you what was already there." She left, and Harrison stood in the doorway watching the sunrise. The world looked different now. Brighter. Fuller. Possible in ways it hadn't been before. He went back inside to his children, who were just starting to wake up. He picked up Lucas, holding his son close, feeling the warmth of his small body. "You're amazing," he whispered to the baby. "You're all amazing. And we're going to prove everyone wrong together." Lucas made a soft sound, almost like agreement. Harrison smiled, tears streaming down his face. Happy tears. Grateful tears. Tears of a father who'd been given an unexpected gift. Hope. Real, tangible, evidence-based hope. And it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever received. The weeks following Lucas's breakthrough passed in a blur of medical appointments, therapy sessions, and growing connection. Dr. Graham ran extensive tests on all three babies, documenting their neural responses and physical capabilities. While the results couldn't fully explain how Lucas was moving his finger, they did show unusual patterns of brain activity that suggested adaptation was occurring. "The brain is still largely a mystery," Dr. Graham admitted during one appointment. "We understand some pathways, but infant neurology, especially in cases of trauma, can surprise us. What you're doing with physical therapy seems to be stimulating growth we didn't think was possible." Harrison took satisfaction in the doctor's revised opinion, but he didn't gloat. He simply focused on what mattered: his children and their care. As the calendar turned to May, spring brought warmth and renewal. The garden that Catherine had loved so much burst into bloom. Harrison found himself spending mornings outside with the babies, talking to them about the flowers, the birds, the changing weather. Things he would have dismissed as pointless before. Now he understood that every experience, every word, every moment of engagement mattered. Imani continued arriving each evening in her signature bright dresses, now often in cheerful florals that matched the spring season. Harrison found himself looking forward to her arrival with an anticipation that went beyond just the therapy she provided. He enjoyed her company, her optimism, her gentle wisdom. She made the hard work feel less like a burden and more like a shared purpose. One evening in mid-May, after they'd settled the babies for the night, Imani and Harrison sat in the rocking chairs Catherine had picked out, drinking tea and talking quietly. Rachel had gone to visit friends and the house was peaceful. "Can I ask you something?" Harrison said, breaking a comfortable silence. "Always," Imani replied. "Why haven't you ever mentioned having a life outside this house? You're here every night. Do you have friends? Family? Someone special?" Imani smiled, a hint of sadness in her expression. "I have family. My parents live across town. I see them when I can. As for someone special, no. There was someone once, but he didn't understand my calling. He thought working with special needs children was too depressing, too limiting. We wanted different things." "I'm sorry," Harrison said. "Don't be. It taught me what I need in a partner. Someone who understands that love isn't just about happiness and ease. Sometimes love is showing up when things are hard. Being present even when there's no obvious reward." Harrison felt those words settle into his chest. That's exactly what Imani had been doing for his family. Showing up. Being present. Loving his children without expecting anything in return. "You're remarkable," he said quietly. "I hope you know that." Imani blushed, looking down at her tea. "I'm just doing what feels right." "No," Harrison insisted. "You're doing more than that. You're saving us. All of us. I was drowning before you came. Couldn't see past my grief. Couldn't connect with my children. You showed me how to be their father again." "You were always their father," Imani said gently. "You just needed time to find your way." They sat in silence for a moment, something unspoken hanging in the air between them. Harrison felt it, a pull toward this woman who'd walked into his life during his darkest time. But he wasn't sure if what he felt was real or just gratitude, if he was ready for anything beyond the fragile stability they'd built together. As if sensing his confusion, Imani changed the subject. "Tell me more about Catherine. What did she like to do?" Harrison smiled, grateful for the redirect. "She loved gardening. Loved getting her hands dirty and watching things grow. She said it was proof that beautiful things could come from small beginnings. She'd spend hours out there planning and planting, talking to the plants like they were her children. She sounds wonderful, Imani said warmly. She was. And I think she'd like you. You have the same kind of optimism. The same belief in possibilities. I hope I would have lived up to her standards, Imani replied. You do, Harrison said firmly. You exceed them. Over the following weeks, their conversations deepened. Harrison shared stories about his life before tragedy, his hopes and dreams, his fears and failures. Imani shared her own history, her brother's illness, her grandmother's teachings, her belief that every life has purpose and value regardless of circumstances. They worked together seamlessly now, anticipating each other's needs, finishing each other's sentences. The triplets responded to their combined care with continued progress. Lucas now moved 3 fingers intentionally. Isabel had started making eye contact more consistently. Olivia's muscle tone was improving, her body less rigid. Dr. Graham documented everything, fascinated by the progress. He'd brought in specialists, neurologists who couldn't quite explain what they were seeing but couldn't deny its reality. The medical community was starting to pay attention to Harrison's children, to Imani's methods, to the possibility that recovery might look different than traditional medicine expected. One evening in early June, as warm summer air drifted through open windows, Harrison found himself watching Imani more than usual. She was wearing a bright yellow dress, her hair pulled back in a colorful scarf, her face glowing with concentration as she worked with Isabel. She was beautiful, Harrison realized. Not just physically, though she was certainly that. But beautiful in her spirit, her dedication, her capacity for hope and love. And he was falling for her. The realization hit him with surprising force. Somewhere between despair and hope, between grief and healing, he developed feelings that went far beyond gratitude or admiration. He cared about Imani Washington in ways that had nothing to do with his children's care and everything to do with who she was as a person. But was it too soon? Catherine had been gone less than 6 months. Was he betraying her memory by developing feelings for someone else? Was he confusing gratitude with love? Harrison wrestled with these questions as the evening progressed. Imani seemed to sense something was different, shooting him concerned glances but not pressing when he didn't explain. After the babies were settled, as they sat together in the nursery's rocking chairs with their usual tea, Imani finally asked, "Are you okay? You've been quiet tonight." Harrison took a deep breath, deciding to be honest. "I've been thinking about you. About us. About what this is becoming." Imani set down her tea, giving him her full attention. "And what is this becoming, Harrison?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I know I look forward to seeing you every day. I know I think about you when you're not here. I know you've become incredibly important to me, and not just because of what you do for my children." Imani's expression was gentle but guarded. "Those are big feelings, Harrison. Are you sure they're about me? Or are they about everything I represent? Hope, healing, moving forward." "I've asked myself the same question," Harrison said. "And honestly, I'm not completely sure. Everything is still so tangled up. My grief, my gratitude, my confusion about what comes next. But I know that when I'm with you, I feel more like myself than I have since Catherine died. You make me want to be better. Want to hope again. Want to imagine a future that isn't just about surviving." Imani was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but firm. "I care about you too, Harrison. More than I probably should. But I need you to be sure. I can't be a replacement for what you lost. I can't be the person you turn to just because you're lonely or grateful. I need to be chosen for who I am, not what I represent." "You're right," Harrison said. "And I'm not sure I can make that distinction yet. Everything is still too close, too complicated." "Then we wait," Imani said simply. "We continue as we are. We focus on the babies. We let ourselves heal. And if something real is meant to develop between us, it will happen in its own time. There's no rush." Harrison nodded, grateful for her wisdom. "Thank you for understanding. For not pushing or demanding clarity I can't give yet. We're building something important here," Imani replied. "For your children, yes, but also for ourselves. Let's not rush it. Let's let it unfold naturally." They finished their tea in comfortable silence, the unspoken feelings acknowledged but not acted upon. When Imani left at dawn, Harrison walked her to the door and squeezed her hand briefly. "Thank you," he said. "For everything." "Always," she replied, smiling. Over the next few weeks, their relationship shifted subtly. The attraction was acknowledged but not pursued, allowing it to exist without pressure or expectation. They continued working together but with a new awareness of each other. Small touches lingered longer. Eye contact held meaning beyond words. Silences felt charged with possibility. Rachel noticed, of course. One afternoon when Harrison was working in his office, she knocked and entered without waiting for permission. "You're in love with her," Rachel announced, no question in her voice. Harrison looked up from his laptop. "That's direct. Someone has to be. You're walking around with this look on your face like you've discovered something precious but you're not sure if you're allowed to keep it. Is it too soon?" Harrison asked, needing his sister's perspective. "Catherine hasn't been gone that long." Rachel sat down across from him, her expression serious. "Harrison, there's no timeline for grief. No rule about when you're allowed to feel something for someone else. Catherine loved you. She'd want you to be happy again. She'd want our nieces and nephew to grow up with love and joy in their home. And if Imani can help provide that, if she makes you happy, Catherine would approve. But what if I'm just transferring my feelings? What if I'm confusing gratitude with love?" "Are you?" Rachel challenged. "When you think about Imani, what do you feel?" "Really feel?" Harrison thought about it carefully. "I feel lighter. Like the weight I've been carrying isn't quite so heavy when she's around. I admire her strength, her kindness, her unwavering faith. I respect her intelligence and skill. I enjoy her company beyond just what she does for the babies. When she smiles, I feel happier. When she leaves, the house feels emptier. Is that love? I don't know. But it's something real. Something separate from just being grateful for her help." "Then trust yourself," Rachel said. "You're allowed to move forward. You're allowed to feel hope and happiness again. And Imani, she's special. Anyone can see that. If you have a chance at something good with her, don't let guilt or fear stop you from pursuing it." Harrison absorbed his sister's words, feeling some of his confusion clear. Rachel was right. Catherine would want him to be happy. She'd want their children to grow up in a home filled with love. And if Imani could be part of that, if they could build something together, that wasn't a betrayal. It was healing. That evening, when Imani arrived in a bright purple dress, Harrison greeted her with new resolve. He didn't declare his feelings or rush into anything. But he let himself be present to the possibility. Let himself appreciate her without guilt. Let himself imagine, just maybe, a future that included her beyond just her role as caregiver. They worked together as usual, but the air between them felt different. More open. More hopeful. When their hands touched, they didn't immediately pull away. When their eyes met, they held the gaze a moment longer. As they settled the babies for the night, Harrison said quietly, "I've been thinking about what you said. About waiting, about letting things unfold naturally." "And?" Imani prompted gently. "And I think you're right. But I also want you to know that I'm not just confused or grateful. What I feel for you is real. Maybe it's too soon to act on it. Maybe I need more time to be sure. But it's real, Imani. You're not a replacement or a rebound. You're you." Imani's smile was radiant. "That's all I needed to hear. That you see me as me, not just as the person helping you through tragedy. The rest we can figure out with time." "Time?" Harrison agreed. "We have plenty of that." They stood close together, the nursery quiet around them, 3 babies sleeping peacefully. The yellow walls seemed to glow in the soft light. The animal murals Catherine had loved looked down on them. And Harrison felt, for the first time since his wife died, that maybe he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Healing didn't mean forgetting. Moving forward didn't mean abandoning the past. He could honor Catherine's memory while still opening his heart to new possibilities. He could love what he'd lost while still embracing what might come. Imani touched his arm gently. "I should go. Dawn is coming." "I know," Harrison said. But he didn't move away. Neither did she. They stood there for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Not quite a declaration, not quite a commitment, but an acknowledgement that something important was growing between them. Something worth nurturing. Something worth protecting. Finally, Imani stepped back. "Good night, Harrison." "Good night," he replied. She left, and Harrison remained in the nursery with his children. He looked at each of them, these small humans who'd brought Imani into his life. They were the reason she'd come. But increasingly, she was the reason he felt like living again. Love, Harrison was learning, didn't follow rules or timelines. It appeared when it wanted, in forms unexpected, bringing light into darkness. And if he was lucky, if he was brave, he might get a second chance at happiness. Different than before, yes. But real and worthy and beautiful in its own way. He touched each baby gently, then went to his room. For the first time in months, he fell asleep smiling, dreaming not of what he'd lost but of what might still be possible. July arrived with heat and humidity, summer settling over the estate with full force. The gardens bloomed extravagantly, Catherine's careful planning years ago creating a riot of color that seemed to celebrate life and growth. Harrison started taking the babies outside more often, setting up a shaded area where they could experience sunshine and fresh air while he and Imani continued their therapy work. On a Thursday evening, 2 weeks into July, Isabel changed everything. Harrison was holding her, talking about the flowers visible through the window, describing their colors and scents. Imani was working with Lucas and Olivia. Rachel had joined them, content to observe and help where needed. The nursery felt peaceful, full of the quiet satisfaction that came from purposeful work and growing hope. Harrison shifted Isabel slightly to better support her neck. As he did, he felt her fingers brush against his hand. Nothing unusual there. But then he felt pressure. Definite, intentional pressure. Isabel's small hand was gripping his finger. "Imani," Harrison breathed, afraid to move. "Imani, look." Imani turned immediately, reading the shock in his face. She came closer, examining Isabel's hand. The baby's fingers were wrapped around Harrison's finger, not just touching but gripping with obvious purpose. "Isabel," Imani whispered, wonder in her voice. "Sweet girl, you're holding on." Rachel came closer too, her hand over her mouth. "Is she really? Is it intentional?" Harrison slowly tried to pull his finger away. Isabel's grip tightened, resisting the movement. Then, even more remarkably, she turned her head slightly toward him. The movement was small, but it was there. Clear and undeniable. "She knows you're her father," Imani said, tears streaming down her face. "She's responding to you, Harrison. She knows you." Harrison felt his throat close with emotion. For 4 months, his children had been unable to acknowledge him in any meaningful way. They couldn't smile, couldn't reach for him, couldn't give any sign that they knew who he was. But now Isabel was gripping his finger and turning toward him. Small gestures, yes, but profound in their meaning. "Hi, baby girl," Harrison whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm here. Daddy's here." Isabel's grip tightened again as if answering. Harrison pulled her close to his chest, tears flowing freely now. Rachel was crying too, and Imani, her face glowing with the joy of witnessing something she'd believed in but others had doubted. They spent the next hour testing Isabel's responses, documenting everything. She could grip and release on command. She could turn her head toward voices. Her eyes tracked movement more consistently than before. The improvements weren't dramatic, but they were real and measurable. "This is incredible," Rachel said, filming everything on her phone. "Dr. Graham has to see this." They called the doctor immediately despite the late hour. Dr. Graham, to his credit, answered and listened carefully to Harrison's excited explanation. "Bring her in first thing tomorrow morning," he said. "I want to run full assessments. If what you're describing is accurate, this could change how we understand infant spinal injury recovery." That night, after Imani left and Rachel went to bed, Harrison sat in the nursery with his 3 children. He held Isabel close, marveling at her new capabilities. Then he held Lucas, who continued his finger movements. Then Olivia, who seemed more alert than she'd been weeks ago even without dramatic breakthroughs. "You're all fighters," Harrison told them. "Every single one of you. And we're going to keep fighting together. Keep working. Keep believing." The next morning, Dr. Graham's office was full again. Not just with Harrison's family, but with specialists he'd called in. Neurologists, pediatric therapists, researchers interested in developmental recovery. Isabel performed beautifully, demonstrating her new skills for a room full of astonished medical professionals. "This shouldn't be possible," one neurologist said, not unkindly. The damage to her spinal cord was documented. Significant. And yet here she is, showing motor control that her injury should prevent. "The brain is adaptive," Imani said firmly, her voice calm despite the attention. "Especially in infants. Neural pathways can reform. Connections can develop in unexpected ways. These babies aren't defying medicine. They're demonstrating how much we still don't understand about human recovery capacity." The specialists tested all 3 babies, documenting Lucas's finger movements, Olivia's improved alertness, Isabel's gripping and head turning. They ran scans, checked reflexes, mapped neural responses. The results were consistent. All 3 babies were showing improvements that medical science couldn't fully explain but couldn't deny. By the end of the appointment, Dr. Graham pulled Harrison aside. "I owe you an apology. When you first came to me talking about progress, I was skeptical. I should have trusted your observations as their father. And I should have trusted Miss Washington's expertise, even if it comes from non-traditional sources." "Thank you," Harrison said. "That means a lot." "I'd like to document this case formally," Dr. Graham continued. Write a paper, present findings at conferences. With your permission, of course. This could help other families facing similar situations. Other children who might benefit from these alternative therapy approaches. Do whatever helps other people, Harrison agreed immediately. If our story can give other families hope, share it freely. The news spread quickly. By that evening, Harrison's phone was ringing constantly. Media outlets wanting interviews. Medical facilities requesting information. Other parents of children with spinal injuries asking for help, for hope, for the name of the miracle worker who'd made the impossible possible. Harrison fielded calls while Imani worked with the babies as usual, seemingly unfazed by the attention. When he finally joined her in the nursery, he found her singing to Olivia, her voice gentle and soothing. "You know you're about to become famous?" Harrison said. "Everyone wants to know about your methods, your techniques, your grandmother's wisdom." Imani shrugged, smiling. "I'm not interested in fame. I'm interested in helping children. If sharing what I know can do that, wonderful. But I'm not looking for recognition or glory." "You deserve both," Harrison insisted. "What you've done for my family, for my children, it's extraordinary." "What we've done together," Imani corrected. "You did the hard work, Harrison. You chose to be present. You chose to believe. You chose to put in the hours, the effort, the emotional investment. I just showed you the path. You walked it yourself." Harrison shook his head, but he was smiling. Always so humble. "Can't you just accept that you're amazing?" "I'm doing what I'm meant to do," Imani replied. "That doesn't make me amazing. Just purposeful." Over the following weeks, the attention intensified. Reporters came to the house. Camera crews filmed the nursery, the therapy sessions, the babies demonstrating their new skills. Harrison gave interviews, always making sure to credit both Imani and his children's own fighting spirits. Imani gave interviews too, though reluctantly, explaining her grandmother's techniques and her belief in the body's capacity for adaptation and healing. Patricia came to visit, apologizing tearfully for her earlier criticisms. "I was wrong," she said, hugging Harrison tightly. "I thought you weren't doing enough. But you were doing exactly what needed to be done. You were trusting the right person, giving your children the best possible chance." "We all just want what's best for them," Harrison replied graciously, letting go of old resentments. Through it all, the babies continued improving. Slowly, incrementally, but undeniably. Lucas now moved his entire hand. Isabel could turn her head almost 90 degrees. Olivia's muscle tone was improving dramatically, her body less rigid, more responsive to touch and movement. Dr. Graham documented everything meticulously. His paper, when published, would detail the unprecedented recovery of 3 children written off by initial medical assessments. It would challenge assumptions about infant spinal injury. It would offer hope to families facing similar diagnoses. And it would credit both traditional medical care and alternative therapeutic approaches, suggesting that the future of treatment might lie in combining methods rather than dismissing anything that didn't fit conventional expectations. One evening in late July, after a particularly exhausting day of interviews and medical appointments, Harrison found himself alone with Imani in the nursery. The babies were asleep, the house quiet. Outside, fireflies danced in the garden Catherine had loved. "I need to talk to you about something," Harrison said, his heart racing. Imani looked up from the baby monitor she'd been adjusting. "Of course. What is it?" "Your contract as a caregiver, it was temporary. Just to see if you could help. But you've done more than help. You've changed everything. I want to offer you a permanent position. Full-time, full benefits, a salary increase that properly reflects your skills and dedication. Whatever you want, whatever you need to stay." Imani was quiet for a moment. "Harrison, that's very generous." "It's practical," Harrison corrected. "You're essential to my children's care and progress. And honestly, you're essential to me too. I can't imagine doing any of this without you now." "Okay," Imani said simply. "I accept. Gratefully. This has become more than a job to me too. Your children, your family, they're part of my heart now." Harrison felt relief wash over him. He'd been worried she might refuse, might feel like the attention and pressure were too much. But she'd accepted without hesitation, and he was grateful beyond words. "There's something else," he said, his voice dropping lower. "Something personal." Imani's expression shifted, understanding dawning. "Harrison." "I know we said we'd wait," Harrison interrupted gently. "I know I needed time to be sure to sort out my feelings. But Imani, I am sure. What I feel for you isn't gratitude. It's not grief looking for comfort. It's real and it's growing, and I can't pretend it isn't there anymore." "I feel it too," Imani admitted quietly. But I'm still concerned about the timing. About whether we're both emotionally ready for this. I'll never be completely healed from losing Catherine, Harrison said honestly. That grief will always be part of me. But I've learned that I can honor her memory while still moving forward. I can love what I had with her while still opening my heart to something new. And Imani, what we have, what we're building, it's not diminishing what I had with Catherine. It's different, separate, its own beautiful thing. Imani stepped closer to him, her eyes searching his face. Are you sure? Really sure? I'm sure, Harrison confirmed. I love you, Imani Washington. Not for what you've done, though I'm grateful for that. But for who you are. Your kindness, your strength, your unwavering belief in possibilities. You make me better. You make my world brighter. And I want you in my life, in my children's lives, not just as their caregiver but as more. Tears welled in Imani's eyes, but she was smiling. I love you too, Harrison. I tried not to. Tried to keep boundaries, keep things professional. But somewhere along the way you became more than just someone I worked for. You became someone I cared deeply about. Someone I could imagine building a future with. Harrison reached out and cupped her face gently. Can I kiss you? Yes, Imani whispered. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, to pull away. But she didn't. Their lips met softly, tentatively at first, then with growing certainty. The kiss was sweet and full of promise, a beginning rather than a culmination. When they pulled apart, both were smiling through tears. This doesn't change anything with the babies, Imani said. Their care comes first. Always, Harrison agreed. But it matters too. We're allowed to have this. They stood close together, foreheads touching, breathing in sync. The nursery around them glowed with soft light, 3 babies sleeping peacefully, unaware that their father had just taken another step toward healing, toward hope, toward love. Outside, the fireflies continued their dance, nature celebrating in its own quiet way. For 3 weeks, Harrison and Imani existed in a state of careful balance. Their relationship was no longer just professional, but they were cautious about letting their personal connection interfere with the baby's care. They were affectionate when alone, but focused and professional during therapy sessions. It felt right, this slow building of something real and lasting. Then August brought complications. It started with an article in a major newspaper. The headline read, "Miracle Babies or Medical Fraud. Family trusts unlicensed caregiver over doctors." Harrison read it with growing horror. The article questioned Imani's credentials, suggested Harrison was being taken advantage of, implied that the baby's progress might be exaggerated or even fabricated. It quoted anonymous medical professionals expressing concern about alternative therapies being promoted over evidence-based medicine. "This is ridiculous," Rachel said, reading over Harrison's shoulder. "They're questioning everything you've accomplished." "They're questioning Imani," Harrison corrected, anger building. "And they're wrong. Every bit of progress has been documented by Dr. Graham. Nothing about this is fraud." But the damage was done. Within days, other outlets picked up the story. Social media debates raged between people defending alternative medicine and people insisting only traditional medical approaches were valid. Reporters camped outside Harrison's gates, looking for controversial angles. And Patricia called, her voice tight with worry. "Harrison, people are talking. They're saying you're risking your children's well-being by trusting this girl over proper doctors." "Imani isn't this girl," Harrison replied sharply. "She's a skilled therapist who's achieved results that proper doctors said were impossible. But she doesn't have formal credentials," Patricia pressed. "No degree, no license. What if something goes wrong? What if the progress isn't real?" "The progress is real," Harrison insisted. "Dr. Graham has documented everything. Specialists have verified it." Isabel grips and turns her head. Lucas moves his hand. "Olivia's muscle tone has improved dramatically. None of that is fabricated or exaggerated." "I believe you," Patricia said, softer now. "But others don't. And I'm worried about what this negative attention could mean. For the babies. For you. For your family's reputation." After hanging up, Harrison felt the weight of public scrutiny pressing down. He'd been so focused on his children's recovery that he hadn't considered how their story might be perceived by skeptics. Hadn't anticipated that Imani's lack of formal credentials would become ammunition for people determined to dismiss their success. That evening when Imani arrived, Harrison could see the strain on her face. She wore a bright green dress, but her usual radiance was dimmed. "I read the articles," she said quietly. "I understand if you need to distance yourself from me. If the negative attention is too much." "Absolutely not," Harrison said firmly. I'm not backing away from you or from what we've accomplished together. But Harrison, your reputation matters. Your business, your family's standing in the community. I don't want to be the reason those things suffer. You're not the reason, Harrison insisted. Narrow-minded people who can't accept anything outside traditional medical models are the reason. And I don't care what they think. I care about my children and I care about you. Nothing else matters. Imani's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. That means everything. They continued with the evening's therapy session, but the joy felt muted. The accomplishments that had seemed so pure and beautiful now felt tainted by outside judgment. The situation worsened over the following days. A Child Protective Services worker came to investigate, responding to anonymous complaints. She spent hours examining the babies, reviewing their medical records, interviewing Harrison and Imani separately. In the end, she found nothing concerning and closed the case. But the investigation itself felt like a violation, a suggestion that Harrison wasn't protecting his children properly. Then Patricia called again, her voice shaking. Harrison, I've been contacted by a lawyer. He's suggesting I petition for custody of the babies. He says we could argue they need care from someone with proper credentials, that you're being influenced by this woman who doesn't have the right training. Don't you dare, Harrison said, his voice cold. Don't you even consider it. I'm not, Patricia assured him quickly. I told the lawyer to leave me alone. I believe in what you're doing. But Harrison, there are people out there who want to tear this apart. People who want to prove alternative medicine doesn't work, who want to discredit your success to protect their own beliefs about what's possible. Let them try, Harrison said grimly. I'll fight anyone who tries to take my children or force us to stop the therapy that's actually helping them. He hired lawyers that afternoon. 3 of them, specialists in family law, medical rights, and defamation. They reviewed everything, advised him on how to respond to media inquiries, prepared to defend against any legal challenges that might emerge. You have a strong case, the lead lawyer assured him. Dr. Graham's documentation is thorough. The progress is measurable and verified by multiple medical professionals. Miss Washington's lack of formal credentials is irrelevant given the results she's achieved. Anyone who tries to challenge your custody or force different care options will face a very difficult battle. Harrison felt some relief, but the stress was taking its toll. He wasn't sleeping well, was constantly checking his phone for new attacks, was snapping at people who didn't deserve his anger. One evening he found himself in his office at midnight, staring at his computer screen, reading every article and social media post about his family. Most were supportive, but the negative ones cut deep. People called him irresponsible, called Imani a charlatan, suggested the baby's progress was either exaggerated or would ultimately prove temporary and meaningless. Hey, a soft voice said from the doorway. Harrison looked up to find Imani standing there, still in her bright dress from earlier. She should have left hours ago, but she'd stayed, perhaps sensing he needed support. You should be home, Harrison said. Resting. This isn't your burden to carry. Yes, it is, Imani replied, coming into the office and sitting across from him. We're in this together, remember? What affects you affects me. What threatens your family threatens what we've built. I won't let them hurt you, Harrison said fiercely. I won't let anyone diminish what you've accomplished or question your value to my children. I know, Imani said gently. But Harrison, you have to let some of this go. You can't read every criticism, can't respond to every skeptic. We know the truth. Dr. Graham knows the truth. Your family knows the truth. That has to be enough. It should be, Harrison agreed. But it's hard to watch people attack you when you've done nothing but help. I've faced skepticism before, Imani reminded him. When my brother was alive, doctors dismissed my grandmother's techniques constantly. Called them folk medicine, superstition, wishful thinking. But we knew they helped Jordan have a better quality of life. We knew they gave him comfort and moments of improvement that medical science couldn't explain. The same thing is happening here. We're challenging assumptions and people don't like having their assumptions challenged. Harrison absorbed her words, feeling some of his anger dissipate. She was right. They couldn't control public opinion. They could only focus on what mattered, the babies and their continued progress. I'm sorry you're going through this, Harrison said. I'm sorry I brought this attention down on you. Don't be sorry, Imani insisted. I knew what I was getting into when I agreed to share our story. I knew there would be skeptics. But the potential good outweighs the temporary discomfort. If our success helps even one other family, one other child, then it's worth facing some criticism. Harrison stood and pulled Imani into his arms. She came willingly, resting her head against his chest. They stood like that for a long moment, drawing strength from each other. "I love you," Harrison murmured into her hair. "Thank you for being strong when I'm struggling." "I love you too," Imani replied. "And we'll get through this together." The storm continued for another week. More articles, more debates, more skeptical voices. But Harrison stopped reading them. He focused instead on what he could control: his children's care, his support of Imani, his commitment to continuing the therapy that was working. Dr. Graham helped by publishing his findings in a respected medical journal. The paper was peer-reviewed, data-driven, objective. It acknowledged the unconventional nature of Imani's methods while celebrating the measurable results. It called for more research into alternative therapeutic approaches for infant spinal injuries rather than dismissing them outright. The publication shifted public opinion somewhat. Medical professionals began defending Harrison and Imani, pointing to the documented evidence. Other families shared their own stories of alternative therapies helping where traditional medicine had failed. The narrative started to change from dangerous charlatan to innovative approach worthy of consideration. Still, the experience left scars. Harrison became more protective of his privacy, more selective about what he shared publicly. Imani became more cautious, documenting everything meticulously, always aware that her work might be scrutinized or challenged. But through it all, they had each other. And they had the undeniable truth of 3 babies who were defying expectations, growing stronger, achieving things doctors said would never happen. One evening, after the worst of the media attention had died down, Harrison and Imani sat in the restored nursery with the babies. Isabel was gripping a small toy. Lucas was moving his arm in wider ranges. Olivia was making sounds that almost resembled words. "We did this," Harrison said quietly. "Despite everything, despite all the attacks and doubts, we did this." "No," Imani corrected gently. "They did this, these 3 fighters. We just gave them the support and belief they needed. The strength came from them." Harrison looked at his children, these small humans who'd survived so much. Born in trauma, written off by medical professionals, facing lives of severe limitation. Yet here they were, improving every day, proving that possibilities existed beyond what anyone had imagined. "Catherine would be so proud," he said, tears in his eyes. "Of them, of me for not giving up, of you for believing. She'd love that our children are surrounded by such hope." "I think she knows," Imani said softly. "I think wherever she is, she's watching and smiling." Harrison pulled Imani close and together they watched their children. Not his children and her job. Their children because that's what they'd become. A family built from tragedy and hope, strengthened by love and determination. The storm had tested them. But they'd weathered it together. And they'd emerged stronger, more certain, more committed to the path they'd chosen. Outside, the August night was warm and full of stars. Inside, the nursery glowed with soft light and love. And 3 babies slept peacefully, unaware of the battles fought on their behalf, unaware of the love surrounding them, aware only of comfort and care and the steady presence of people who refused to give up. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More therapy, more progress to document, more skeptics to face. But tonight was for gratitude. For acknowledging how far they'd come. For celebrating not just the baby's improvements but the family they'd become in the process of fighting for those improvements. Harrison kissed the top of Imani's head. She squeezed his hand in response. No words were needed. They understood each other perfectly. They were a team. A family. And nothing, no amount of criticism or doubt or challenge, would break what they'd built together. September arrived with cooler temperatures and changing leaves. The summer's controversy had faded somewhat, replaced by cautious acceptance from the medical community. Dr. Graham's paper had been well received, generating serious discussion about alternative therapeutic approaches. Several major hospitals reached out, asking for information about Imani's methods, interested in incorporating them into their own protocols. Life at the Bennett estate settled into a comfortable routine. Harrison had fully stepped back from daily company operations, trusting his leadership team to handle most decisions. His priority was his children and his relationship with Imani, which had deepened into something solid and sustaining. They talked about the future now, about what their family might look like, about possibilities that once seemed impossible. The babies continued improving. Isabel could now turn her head fully side to side. Lucas moved his entire arm intentionally. Olivia made distinct sounds, each one potentially the beginning of language. Dr. Graham monitored their progress closely, documenting every milestone, marveling at their continued development. One evening in mid-September, as autumn painted the garden in shades of gold and red, Harrison sat in his office reviewing some business contracts his assistant insisted needed his attention. It was nearly midnight. Imani was in the nursery with the babies, and Harrison planned to join her soon. But first he needed to approve these documents. His phone buzzed with a security alert. One of the nursery cameras had detected unusual movement patterns. Harrison frowned, pulling up the security feed on his computer. Imani was there as expected. But she was doing something he'd never seen before. All 3 babies were out of their cribs, positioned on the floor in a specific triangular arrangement. Imani moved between them in what looked like a choreographed pattern, her hands touching each baby in sequence, her lips moving in words the audio couldn't quite capture. Harrison's heart began to race. What was she doing? Why were the babies arranged like that? Why hadn't she mentioned planning something different tonight? He watched for several minutes. Imani's movements were precise, ritualistic almost. She would touch Isabel's forehead, then Lucas's chest, then Olivia's hands. Then she'd move in a circle, repeating the pattern. Over and over, her face intense with concentration. The babies weren't crying or distressed. But they weren't responding in their usual ways either. They lay still, almost unnaturally still, as Imani continued her strange routine. Harrison felt fear creep in, old doubts resurfacing. He trusted Imani. Loved her. Believed in her methods. But this looked different from the therapy he'd learned and participated in. This looked like something else entirely. He thought about the summer's criticisms, the articles questioning her credentials and methods. He'd defended her fiercely, dismissed every skeptic. But what if there was something he didn't know? Some aspect of her approach she'd been keeping hidden? Harrison's hand moved to his phone. He could call someone. Dr. Graham. Rachel. The police even. But that felt like a betrayal. Imani deserved his trust. She'd earned it through months of dedication and love. Yet watching the screen, seeing his children arranged in that unusual pattern, seeing Imani performing movements that seemed more spiritual than medical, Harrison felt uncertainty creep in. He closed his laptop and stood. He would go to the nursery. He would see for himself what was happening. He would ask Imani to explain before jumping to conclusions. That was the reasonable, rational, loving thing to do. But as he walked through the quiet house toward the nursery, his heart pounded with a mixture of fear and confusion. Everything they'd built, everything they'd accomplished, rested on trust. If that trust was misplaced, if there was something dangerous or deceptive happening, he needed to know. His children's safety came first. Always. Harrison reached the nursery door and paused, listening. Imani's voice drifted through, melodic and low, speaking words he couldn't understand. Not English. Something older, something that sounded like it came from deep cultural roots. He pushed the door open. Imani looked up immediately, no guilt in her expression but surprise. Harrison. I didn't expect you yet. Harrison took in the scene. The babies on the floor, positioned carefully. Imani kneeling between them. An atmosphere of intense focus hanging in the air. What are you doing? He asked, keeping his voice neutral. This isn't the usual therapy routine. Imani stood slowly, brushing off her bright blue dress. No, it's not. This is something different. Something I've been building toward. What do you mean? Harrison stepped closer, examining his children. They looked fine, peaceful even. But the arrangement still felt strange. Remember I told you my grandmother taught me techniques passed down through generations? Imani said, her voice calm and steady. Some of those techniques are about physical therapy. Moving muscles, stimulating nerves. But some are about energy. About helping the body remember its wholeness through patterns and intention. Harrison felt his skepticism rising. Energy work? That sounds like... Like what? Imani challenged gently. Like superstition? Like something that can't be real because Western medicine doesn't recognize it. I just want to understand, Harrison said, trying to keep defensiveness out of his voice. You've never done this before. At least not when I've been here. I've been preparing them, Imani explained. The physical therapy came first, building their strength and neural connections. But this, what I'm doing now, this is about helping them integrate those improvements. About giving their bodies permission to use what they've learned. Harrison looked at his children. Isabel was making small movements with her fingers. Lucas was turning his head slowly. Olivia's eyes were open and alert, tracking Imani's movements. It looks ritualistic, Harrison said. Like some kind of ceremony. In a way it is, Imani admitted. My grandmother believed healing required more than just physical manipulation. It required intention, focus, belief. The patterns I'm using, the words I'm speaking, they're traditional. Used by my ancestors to help people recover from injury and illness. Harrison wanted to believe her. Wanted to accept this explanation without question. But the fear wouldn't quite recede. Why didn't you tell me you were going to do this? Because I knew you'd worry, Imani said honestly. I knew it would look strange to someone not familiar with these practices. And I wanted to make sure I was doing it right before I explained. You should have told me anyway, Harrison said, hearing his voice harden. These are my children. I deserve to know everything you're doing with them. You're right, Imani agreed immediately. I should have communicated better. I'm sorry. The apology deflated some of Harrison's anger. Imani wasn't defensive or dismissive. She acknowledged his concerns, validated his right to know everything about his children's care. Can you explain what you're doing? Harrison asked, softer now. In detail? Imani nodded. Of course. Come sit with me. They sat on the floor together, the babies between them. Imani began explaining the technique she'd been using. How positioning the children in specific patterns could help their nervous systems communicate better. How certain touch sequences, passed down through generations, seemed to stimulate healing responses. How the words she spoke, traditional phrases in her grandmother's language, were about intention and belief, about creating an atmosphere of healing and hope. Does it sound strange? Imani asked when she finished. Yes. Can I prove scientifically that it works? No. But I've seen it work. With my brother, with other children my grandmother helped. And I believe it can help your children too. Harrison listened carefully. Part of him wanted to dismiss this as wishful thinking, as superstition masquerading as therapy. But another part remembered all the times doctors had been wrong. All the predictions of permanent paralysis that were proving inaccurate. All the improvements traditional medicine couldn't explain. Show me, he said finally. Show me exactly what you're doing. Let me participate. Imani's face lit up with gratitude. Thank you for trusting me enough to stay open. She guided Harrison through the patterns, explaining the purpose of each position and touch. He followed her instructions, noting how the babies did seem to respond to the specific sequences. Isabel's grip strengthened. Lucas's movements became more purposeful. Olivia made sounds that might have been attempts at communication. You're saying this helps them integrate everything they've been learning? Harrison asked, repeating the pattern Imani had shown him. Yes. Think of it like defragmenting a computer. The improvements are there, but they're scattered, not fully organized. This helps everything come together, helps their bodies and brains coordinate better. They worked together for over an hour. Harrison's initial fear faded, replaced by curiosity and hope. Maybe this was exactly what his children needed. Maybe traditional approaches and alternative methods weren't contradictory but complementary. As dawn approached and they finally settled the babies back in their cribs, Harrison pulled Imani close. I'm sorry I doubted. Sorry I jumped to fear instead of trusting you. You were protecting your children, Imani said. I understand that. And you're right that I should have told you before tonight. We're partners in this. I can't keep things from you just because I think they might worry you. No more secrets, Harrison said firmly. Even if you think I won't understand, even if it sounds strange. I want to know everything. No more secrets, Imani agreed. They sealed the promise with a kiss, long and deep and full of renewed trust. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. So what happens now? Harrison asked. After this, integration work? We wait and see, Imani said. If it works the way I hope, the baby should show new levels of coordination and control. More intentional movement, better awareness of their bodies. Maybe even the beginning of vocalization. And if it doesn't work? Imani shrugged. Then we try something else. We keep adapting, keep learning, keep believing. That's all we can do. Harrison nodded, accepting her answer. They left the nursery together as sunrise painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. The house was quiet, Rachel still asleep in the guest quarters. Outside, birds began their morning songs. Stay for breakfast? Harrison asked as they reached the kitchen. I'd love to, Imani replied. They cooked together, moving around the kitchen in comfortable synchronicity. Harrison made eggs while Imani prepared toast and fruit. They talked about everything and nothing, easy conversation that came from months of building connection and trust. What would you have done if I'd reacted badly last night? Imani asked as they sat down to eat. If I'd told you to stop and refused to let you continue? I would have stopped immediately, Imani said without hesitation. Your authority as their father comes first, always. I might have tried to explain more, to convince you. But ultimately your decision would have been final. Harrison reached across the table and took her hand. Thank you for respecting that. For never pushing boundaries even when you believed you were right. These are your children, Imani said simply. My job is to help them and support you, not to override your judgment. They finished breakfast and went upstairs together. At the nursery door they paused. The babies were still sleeping, peaceful in their cribs, unaware of the night's drama. I love them so much, Harrison said quietly. Everything I do is about giving them the best possible life. I know, Imani replied. And they're so lucky to have you as their father. Harrison turned to face her fully. I want you to know something. Last night, when I saw you doing something I didn't understand, my first instinct was fear. But my second instinct was to come and ask, not to call for help or intervention. That's because I trust you, Imani. Fundamentally, deeply trust you. Even when I'm scared or confused, I believe in your intentions and your abilities. Imani's eyes filled with tears. That means everything to me, Harrison. I've spent my whole life having my methods questioned and dismissed. Having you trust me, even when you don't understand, is the greatest gift you could give. They kissed again, gentle and tender. Then they went into the nursery together, ready to face whatever the day would bring. Ready to continue their work with faith and love guiding them. The suspense of the night before was over. The fear had been confronted and resolved. And their bond, tested by uncertainty, had emerged stronger than before. 2 weeks after the night Harrison discovered Imani's integration work, something remarkable happened. Something that would change everything. It was October 3rd, a crisp autumn morning. Harrison had spent the night in the nursery as usual, working alongside Imani with the therapy routines. The integration techniques had become part of their regular practice now, though they still used the physical therapy as the foundation. The babies had shown continued improvement. Isabel could now grip firmly enough to hold lightweight toys. Lucas moved both arms with increasing control. Olivia's vocalizations were becoming more varied and purposeful. But they were still fundamentally paralyzed. Still unable to sit up, roll over, or move their lower bodies. That morning, as Imani was working with Lucas on the floor, she positioned him on his stomach to practice head control. Harrison was nearby with the girls, singing to them while doing their morning stretches. Harrison, Imani said, her voice strange. Harrison, look. Harrison turned immediately, reading the shock in her face. He looked at Lucas and felt his heart stop. Lucas was pushing up. Actively, intentionally pushing his upper body off the floor using his arms. His face was scrunched with effort, his small body trembling, but he was doing it. Lifting himself. A movement that required muscle control he wasn't supposed to have. Oh my God, Harrison breathed. He scrambled over to them, afraid to startle Lucas, afraid to break whatever magic was happening. Imani had tears streaming down her face but made no move to interfere. She just watched, her hands hovering nearby in case Lucas needed support. Lucas held the position for 5 seconds. Then 10. Then his arms started shaking with fatigue and he slowly lowered back down. But he'd done it. Undeniably, unmistakably done it. Harrison made a sound between a laugh and a sob. He scooped Lucas up, holding him close, kissing his son's face repeatedly. You did it, buddy. You did it. Imani was laughing and crying at the same time. The integration work. Connected everything. His brain found the pathways it needed. Rachel came running into the nursery, alarmed by the commotion. What happened? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Harrison said, his voice breaking. Everything's right. Lucas pushed himself up. He actually pushed himself up. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. She sank to the floor next to them, staring at her nephew with wonder. Are you serious? He really did it? We both saw it, Imani confirmed. Full extension held the position for about 10 seconds. It was intentional and controlled. Rachel started crying too. The 3 adults sat on the nursery floor, Lucas in Harrison's arms, all of them overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. Over the next hour they tried to get Lucas to repeat the movement. He was too tired at first, having expended enormous effort on that initial attempt. But after a nap, when they placed him on his stomach again, he pushed up once more. This time even more strongly, holding the position for 15 seconds. Harrison called Dr. Graham immediately, interrupting the doctor's morning appointments. Lucas pushed himself up. Full arm extension. Controlled movement. You need to see this. Dr. Graham arrived within an hour, bringing 2 other specialists with him. They examined Lucas carefully, testing his strength and control. They had him demonstrate the movement multiple times, documenting everything on video. This is unprecedented, one specialist said, shaking his head in amazement. The injury he sustained should have prevented this kind of upper body control. Yet here he is, clearly demonstrating motor function we said was impossible. What about the girls? Dr. Graham asked, turning to examine Isabel and Olivia. Are they showing similar improvements? As if on cue, Isabel, whom Rachel had been holding, reached out her arm. Not just moved it but reached for a toy hanging above her. Her small hand closed around it, gripped it, pulled it toward herself. Purposeful, coordinated movement that went far beyond anything she'd done before. The room erupted again. Rachel was laughing through tears. Harrison felt like his heart might burst from joy. Imani watched with quiet satisfaction, her faith vindicated in the most beautiful way possible. They spent the rest of the morning testing the baby's capabilities. Lucas could push up consistently now. Isabel could reach and grasp. Olivia, not to be outdone, demonstrated that she could turn her entire body from back to side, a rolling motion that was the precursor to full mobility. I need to document all of this, Dr. Graham said, his professional demeanor cracking with excitement. This isn't just progress. This is revolutionary. These children are defying everything we understand about spinal injury recovery. So you believe it's real? Harrison asked. You're not going to say it's temporary or reflexive? Mr. Bennett, Dr. Graham said seriously, what I'm seeing here is intentional, coordinated motor control. These children are using neural pathways that shouldn't exist. How they're doing it I can't fully explain. But that they're doing it is undeniable. This is real recovery, not reflex or coincidence. The news spread quickly. By afternoon, Harrison's phone was ringing constantly. Media outlets wanting interviews. Medical facilities wanting to study the babies. Other families begging for information, for hope, for the miracle that had happened in Harrison's home. Harrison fielded calls while Imani continued working with the children. Patricia came over immediately, spending hours holding each grandchild, crying happy tears, apologizing repeatedly for ever doubting Harrison's choices. You were right, she said, hugging Harrison tightly. About everything. About Imani, about the therapy, about not giving up. Catherine would be so proud of you. So proud of these babies. That evening, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, Harrison found himself alone with Imani in the nursery. The babies were sleeping peacefully, unaware they'd just become medical miracles. The autumn sun set outside, painting the room in golden light. I can't believe this is real, Harrison said quietly. After all the grief, all the fear, all the doubt. They're actually recovering. They're doing exactly what I knew they could do, Imani replied gently. Their bodies just needed time and the right support. You gave them that. We gave them that, Harrison corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. Imani Washington, I love you. I love you for your strength, your faith, your unwavering belief in possibilities. I love you for seeing potential where others saw only tragedy. I love you for walking into my broken family and refusing to let us stay broken. Imani smiled through tears. I love you too, Harrison. You and these beautiful children have become everything to me. Harrison took a deep breath, his heart racing. I know it's soon. I know we've only been together a few months. But I also know what I want. What I need. I want you in my life forever. I want you as more than just the person who helps with the babies. I want you as my partner, my wife, my children's mother. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, simple but beautiful, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. Marry me, Imani. Not out of gratitude, not because you've helped my children, but because I genuinely, completely love you and want to build a life together. Imani stared at the ring, tears flowing freely now. Harrison. I know it's fast, Harrison said quickly. And if you need time to think about it, I understand. But I had to ask. Had to let you know how serious I am about us. Imani looked from the ring to his face, her expression full of love and wonder. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll marry you. Harrison felt joy explode in his chest. He slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and gratitude and hope he felt. She kissed him back with equal passion, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. We're really doing this, Imani said when they finally pulled apart. Building a life together. Becoming a family. We've been a family for months, Harrison replied. This just makes it official. They sat together in the rocking chairs Catherine had chosen, holding hands, watching the babies sleep. The nursery glowed with the last light of sunset, warm and peaceful and full of love. Catherine would approve, Harrison said quietly. She'd love that you're here, that you're bringing so much joy and hope into our lives. She'd want the babies to have a mother who loves them the way you do. I hope I can honor her memory properly, Imani said. I hope I can be the mother these children deserve. You already are, Harrison assured her. You've been their mother in every way that matters since the day you arrived. This just acknowledges what's already true. Over the following months, the baby's progress continued. By December, Lucas could sit up with minimal support. Isabel could roll completely over. Olivia was making sounds that were clearly attempts at words. Dr. Graham documented everything meticulously, his papers generating international interest in alternative therapeutic approaches for spinal injury. Harrison and Imani were married on a beautiful day in early spring, with the babies present and participating in their own way. The ceremony was small, just family and close friends, held in the garden Catherine had loved. Patricia cried through the entire event, but they were happy tears. Rachel served as maid of honor, giving a speech about how love could heal even the deepest wounds. As Harrison and Imani exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever came, Lucas reached up from Patricia's arms and touched Harrison's hand. A small gesture but profound. His son acknowledging this moment, participating in this celebration of new beginnings. The reception was joyful, full of laughter and music and hope. People who'd doubted, who'd criticized, who'd predicted tragedy came and admitted they'd been wrong. The Bennett family had defied expectations, had proven that love and faith and determination could create miracles. 6 months later, on a warm October afternoon, Harrison stood in the nursery watching Imani work with the children. They were 14 months old now, far beyond what anyone had predicted they'd achieve. Lucas was standing. Not independently but with support, bearing weight on his legs in ways doctors had said would never be possible. Isabel was manipulating toys with both hands, her fine motor control improving daily. Olivia was babbling constantly, recognizable words emerging from the stream of sound. They're going to walk, Imani said confidently, coming to stand beside Harrison. Maybe not today or tomorrow. Maybe not for years. But they're going to walk. I believe that completely. Harrison put his arm around his wife, pulling her close. I believe it too. Because you've taught me that believing in possibilities is how we make them real. The nursery door opened and Rachel peeked in. Am I interrupting? Never, Harrison said, smiling at his sister. Rachel came in carrying a framed photo. I found this in storage. I thought you might want it in here. It was a picture of Catherine, heavily pregnant, standing in this same nursery before it was painted gray. She was smiling at the camera, one hand on her belly, the other raised in a small wave. She looked happy and hopeful and full of dreams for the future. Harrison took the photo, feeling the familiar ache of missing her. But the pain was softer now, wrapped in gratitude for the time they'd had and the children she'd given him. She'd be so happy, Rachel said quietly. About the babies, about you and Imani, about everything. She'd say this is exactly how things were meant to turn out. Harrison placed the photo on the dresser where he could see it every day. Catherine smiling down on the family she'd started, the family that had grown and adapted and found joy again despite impossible circumstances. Thank you, he said to Rachel, for never giving up on me. For believing we could find happiness again. That's what family does, Rachel replied, hugging him tightly. That evening, after Rachel left and the babies were settled for the night, Harrison and Imani sat in the garden Catherine had loved. The autumn air was crisp, the stars bright above them. Everything was peaceful and right. Do you ever regret it? Harrison asked. Taking on this family, this challenge? Your life would be so much simpler if you'd never walked through my door. Imani laughed softly. Simpler maybe, but not better. Not nearly as fulfilling. Harrison, you and these children are the best thing that ever happened to me. You're my purpose, my joy, my future. I regret nothing. Harrison pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. I love you, Mrs. Bennett. I love you too, Imani replied. They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the stars, feeling grateful for second chances and unexpected miracles. For the baby sleeping peacefully inside, defying every prediction. For the love that had grown between them, healing old wounds and creating new possibilities. For the family they'd become, built on hope and faith and unwavering dedication. Lucas would eventually take his first assisted steps at 18 months. Isabel would speak her first clear word at 20 months. Olivia would stand with support at 22 months. The progress would be slow and hard-won, requiring years of continued therapy and dedication. But it would happen. Every milestone would come, proving that the impossible was simply the possible that hadn't been achieved yet. And through it all, Harrison and Imani would be there together. Partners in healing, in parenting, in love. Two people who'd found each other during the darkest time and chosen to build something beautiful from the ruins of tragedy. Catherine's legacy lived on in her children's laughter, in the bright yellow walls she'd chosen, in the love that filled every corner of the home she'd dreamed of. She would always be part of their story, the foundation on which everything else was built. But the future belonged to this new family. To Harrison and Imani, and 3 remarkable children who'd proven that love, belief, and determination could overcome even the most impossible circumstances. The miracles hadn't stopped with the baby's recovery. The real miracle was the family they'd become. The love that had grown. The hope that had survived every trial. The joy that had emerged from grief. As Harrison sat in the garden with his wife, surrounded by everything Catherine had planted with hope for the future, he felt complete peace. The journey had been hard. The losses real. The challenges immense. But they'd made it through. Together. And tomorrow they would continue. Keep working. Keep believing. Keep loving. Keep proving that when kindness, hope, and love lead the way, anything is possible. The stars shone brighter. The garden bloomed eternal. And inside, 3 babies slept peacefully, dreaming of the bright futures they would claim, one small victory at a time. This was their story. A story of tragedy transformed into triumph. Of grief giving way to joy. Of the impossible becoming real through love and faith. And it was only the beginning.